emerging. We want to put something that makes us feel like there's hope, that there's a future. And so I've been using the word, leading now in emerging times, selling in emerging times, innovating in emerging times. And it's a much more hopeful word, and it's a much more purposeful word. And one of my bugaboos, and I'm probably going to step on toes when I say this, but it drives me crazy when people talk about the new normal. There's very little about this.
I've already said that, so sorry.
No, it's just the way it goes. I mean, it's habit. We all do it, and it's a buzzword. But I think that one of the things that's really important is that we react both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to words. And so I think that being really sensitive to our semantics, when I'm talking to people, we obviously want to lead with kindness, because again, we're all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. And I absolutely want to do a full stop right there. Same storm, we're not in the same boat. And so if you lead with compassion and realize that some things are more normal for others, but other people are dealing with a whole new reality. So again, just being mindful of word choice.
I love that. So define for me the word emerging.
So emerging means that we are developing new examples. We've been living outside of example for a really long time. Now protocols are coming in place. Emerging means that people are going to be a little bit more comfortable. And so one of the things, like this is real world. So in the last 2 weeks of coaching, I tend to coach business owners and senior leaders inside of organizations. And I'll tell you, they're getting a lot more pushback right now. They're getting a lot more resistance. And I keep telling them that is a brilliant sign that people are adapting. We're getting more comfortable. We have new routines. We have new protocols. We have new structures and habits on a daily basis. And so it used to be like, oh, I miss my work. And now we're all like, kind of like this 30-second commute. So yeah. You're going to get pushback.
So talk a little bit, one of the things we talked about beforehand was the new reality rather than the new normal, as you're alluding to now. Without stating the obvious about now we're all commuting 30 seconds like you just alluded to, what are some of the obvious differences that you're seeing in your work with your clients between reality then, and we all know what then meant and means, versus reality now? Outside of the obvious, pandemic and stuff that we know about, that we see, but from a leadership standpoint, what are you seeing as major significant differences?
When a crisis first hits, we go into that, and you all, for those of you who don't know me, my background's in neurology and cognitive science, so I get a little brain geeky because I can talk about it for a very long time. But when something happens, when we're met with an unexpected or a blindsided change, we don't fear the change. What we fear is whether we're going to be successful in the new way, and we fear anything that threatens our identity. And so one of the things that's happening right now is that we've gone from this reactionary, STEM reptilian, must survive, we have these emotional hijackings, to now a much more thoughtful response of, I can see a path. Now I need to create a path. Now I need to role model walking that path. And so one of the things that leaders are doing is they're moving from emergency planning to now back to sharing a vision, sharing a strategy, showing people that their role is significant, whether it's back in the office or remote. But the absolute fundamental conversation has shifted from, this is what we're going to do now in this emergency situation, to, oh no, now we're going to start to plan and strategize, because we can start to make some calls that are going to last for more than 48 hours.
Are you seeing companies spending, the hardest thing for me, and this is, again, I'm hoping that people will chime in with questions, because this isn't the Ed and AmyK show by any stretch. It's the AmyK show. But
no, this is our show, everybody's show.
The hardest part for me has been knowing when it's okay to talk business as normal and when we should be, we always need to be sensitive to the fact that there is job loss, another 2-point-something million this week. We're pushing 40 million now when it comes to unemployment here in America. Certainly human loss. We're pushing 100,000 lives that have perished through this. And so we want to be sensitive to that. How do you suggest that we have those conversations where we don't offend on the side of, business, we got to just get back to work, or human life, we don't want to be desensitized to the fact that people are losing loved ones? What advice do you have on that?
The first thing I would say is start with a place of service. And so that is that the conversation shouldn't be about you when you start. It would be like showing up and saying, hey, Ed and Lorianne, what's top of mind for you? What's going on? How are you guys doing? And then you start to set the tone of that conversation. So you can say, oh, we're getting back to business as normal. The kids are online. We're adjusting, or you say to me, hey, we just lost a loved one. And that allows me as a servant leader to let you actually lead the direction. And then I can just go with you and where you're taking me at first. And then if I need to pull you into the next conversation, then it's just a respectful question. So, hey, Ed, are you in a place right now where you can thoughtfully walk through some business ideas, or is this not a good time? And that's saying that I have some differing priorities, but I'm going to respect where you're at first.
Appreciate that. What's been one of the toughest conversations you've had to have through these last 2.5 or 3 months, without getting personal?
I'm you know me, I'm transparent. There have been several. So we had a family loss. We had a family member who was a frontline ER doctor in New York City, 51, 52, who we lost to COVID-19, and just a stellar guy. And then I've had girlfriends whose husbands are on ventilators, so that's been tough. And then, I've had the wide spectrum of what we're talking about today. I've had coaching clients with furloughs and layoffs, and I've had coaching clients that are, I've got people that now don't want to come back to work. They're scared. And so there have been a lot of tough conversations, and including my parents. We've been grocery shopping for them. And I had to have a tough conversation and be like, I don't care if Costco just said you guys get to wear masks. It's not time for you to go back to Costco. But I did it in a very graceful way.
Yeah, we've had those conversations with her mom in her high 80s and my dad in his 90s. Same type of thing. Their life has always been, let's go to the grocery store, let's go to church, let's do this. And
yeah, but they're not listening.
Yeah, that's true. They're not. Well, I don't know. My dad might be. I don't know.
Your dad was just at.
Well, and I think.
They're not listening literally to that. Yeah, my dad was just at Ralph's, and yeah.
That's a behavior that I think all of us can identify with. It doesn't matter how old we are. We don't like feeling stifled. We don't like our freedom taken away. We don't want our independence taken away. Some of us are just less vulnerable, just because of how this vaccine fires and wires. But I think that leaning in with compassion, leaning in with empathy. And so here's a great phrase. So talking about communication, fantastic phrase is to validate and then problem solve. So it doesn't matter where you're seeing resistance, whether it's at home or at work, whether it's going to be now at church, if you're going back to church this Sunday, people are going to be in their own experience. And so for you to first say something along the lines of, that makes sense to me. I get it. I understand. If we can validate and then problem solve or talk about our differing perspectives, we're going to get a lot further in the conversation. So typically what happens, like a classic example, let's just say your mom or dad says, I'm going to Costco. When we go, no, you're not, or you're vulnerable, that doesn't help move the conversation forward. If we can say, hey, I get it. This is tough, or this is frustrating, or you sound frustrated, or you sound determined. What I'm doing is I'm connecting with them before we move to the problem-solving part of the conversation.
No, I like that a lot. That's really good to validate their feelings. And that's, it's okay to not be okay is the phrase I hear a lot of people say right now. I've got more questions. And like I said, I certainly want to keep it open for anybody. And I don't want it to just be, another podcast where I'm interviewing you by any stretch.
No, it's all good. And really, truly, throw a question mark in the chat box and it'll unmute you. We're happy to make it a dialogue.
Or just unmute yourself. You guys can unmute and chime in, or put your video up on the screen. A few have chosen to do that, and I like it. I'd wish everybody would, so we could see you all today. So kids, let's talk about kids for a minute. Okay. Most of us on the call have kids, grandkids, or around kids. The conversation when we first came home, and then they were having to adapt to, we have a lot of kids. We just did, I'm jumping all over. A handful of us from the Center for Family Business yesterday did a little YouTube video congratulating the class of 2020. My wife and I have shared this on this forum before, so it's going to be repetitive for some. We met during the final semester of high school. My closest friends in my life to this point, for them in many ways, are the guys I played high school baseball with my final semester of high school. Kids today aren't getting those experiences. No prom, no spring sports, no end to fall sports or winter, what have you. what can you tell them? You can't replace the experiences they're never going to have, but how can we comfort those that are just missing out on not having a prom or walking across the platform on graduation, or, any advice there? And I'm going to open that up to you, but anybody else, maybe something you're doing that's working. But AmyK, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll start with perhaps two different ways to look at it. One is, I don't think it helps when parents or any type of caregiver or an adult figure does the comparative suffering. So for a child that's missing prom, missing graduation, missing those closures, those are just as real and as sensitive and emotional experiences for them as it is to somebody that says, well, I lost a loved one. And so when we say to a young adult or a small child, well, but you're fine, you've got your toys. There are people who are like losing, family members. That doesn't help them process what it is that they're actually experiencing. And if anything, what it does is then it makes them feel more ashamed or guilty, which just compounds the stress and the anxiety. And so one of the things that I think that for parents to remember is that school wasn't just about academia. School was teaching them how to connect, how to form friendships, how to solve problems, what it looked like to be a team member, what it looked like to get yourself and all these independent skills. And so they're missing out on all of these things. And so one of the things that we haven't explored yet is the level of depression that we're going to see in hindsight in this, the level of anxiety with these kids, their socialization skills. And so I think that one of the things that would be most important is for parents to listen, and to listen without judgment, to listen without interpretation, but just to listen so that they can process what it is that they're feeling. And so oftentimes what I'll go back and I'll say again, just because I think it's so important, is we validate what it is that they're feeling. And I think that one of the things that's really important to do is to expand your child's vocabulary on this. So whether they're 8 or they're 18, children tend to go into the world, unfortunately, with 3, as I hold up 4 fingers, there are three identifiers. They'll say mad, sad, and glad. Like that's the vocabulary that we give them. Are you mad? Are you sad? Or are you glad? And when we can teach children to say, I'm anxious, or I'm frustrated, or I actually don't know what word that I'm looking for, can you help me? That increases their emotional, what I call literacy, their emotional language. And so I think that one of the things too, on a completely different topic, and we can ping pong around a little bit, is that children feel extraordinarily out of control right now. So the way that I look at it from like my childhood development background is there's a hierarchy of control, mom and dad, and then the oldest sibling, followed by the next sibling, followed by the youngest, followed by the dog. And you'll see that the youngest sibling is overly controlling the dog because it's all they have control over. And so when we can give children more control, there's really 2 great ways to do it. One of them is with a simple phrase called, would you be willing? And so you can say something like, would you be willing to set the table? Would you be willing to walk the dog? Would you be willing whatever? And then and a kid might be saying yes, which means that they have control over their choice in that moment. If you get pushback and they say no, then you might be like, well, what might you be willing to do? Not what are you, just what might you? Because you need wiggle room as a parent to be able to brainstorm what it is you want them to do too. So what might you be willing to do? And then here's a great thing too. I used it, so I taught elementary school. So for those of you who don't know me, I started off elementary school teacher, elementary school trainer, corporate trainer, and then here I am today. I have teacher in my DNA. And so one of the things that I used to do when I was in the classroom is I would give the children something called guided choices. It's like, you can read this book, or this book. And they would always be like, oh, Miss Hutchens, we love you. You let us do whatever you want. And I'm like, yeah, as long as it's 1, 2, or 3, right? So as a parent, you can say something like, okay, do you want to clean your room now? Do you want to clean it after we watch 30 minutes of TV? Or do you want to clean it after dinner? In other words, they're going to clean their room.
Yeah.
That's not an option, but they get to choose when they do it. And here's another really great thing to set expectation in the household. If you're giving your child a privilege, if you're going to do something that's really fun, set the expectation for what follows. So for instance, you might say, okay, we're going to do Xbox for 30 minutes. And then here's what's going to happen. I'm going to come in 30 minutes and I'm going to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first thing that you're going to say is, thank you, Mom, for letting us play Xbox for 30 minutes. And then I'm going to say, now it's time for a snack, and we're going to go have that snack. And what you're doing is you're letting them know this is how it's going to roll. Like, this is what's going to happen. So along with the guided choices, then you're setting them up. And here's the crazy thing. You get so much less pushback because there's less uncertainty.
Right.
You're giving your children structure about what's to come.
It's just like in a corporate setting, we put an agenda in front of the people in our board meeting or our client meeting because they want to see what's next.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And kids do too. I mean, part of children's pushback is, yeah, that's their job. Their job is to see where the boundaries start and stop. But some of it is too, is that they don't know what they can get away with because they didn't know what was going to be next. Like, nobody told them, this is what we're doing. This is what you're actually going to say. And you know, and I even have some girlfriends that will go so far, and sister-in-laws that when the kids were young, that would go so far to say, okay, now tell me what it is that you're going to say when we're done. And like, thank you, Mom. It's like, okay, good. We're all set for this.
Yeah. Yeah. You remind, when you're talking about, you're going to do this now or later, you remind me of a good close friend of ours from years ago. We used to, drive through a place with all of our kids and say, okay, what do you want? I went to a ball game with our kids and him and his kids, and he hollered back, hamburger or cheeseburger, as we're driving through. It's like, here's your two choices.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't want the pickles or stuff on, take it off. But hamburger or cheeseburger made it a lot simpler. So we tried to make that change in our family. It wasn't as easy. Old dog, new tricks theory. But
well, and that's just it. I mean, we're all developing new habits, and that's part of where I go to. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, Ed, when we were getting ready for today's call. Just on an email, you mentioned that one of the questions that people had is, how do you talk to your children when you're going back to work?
Right.
And they've enjoyed all the attention. I mean, they've enjoyed it. And I think that it's having a really honest conversation with your children and modeling some of the things that you're feeling. So one of my all-time favorite magical phrases, and for those of you who have been introduced to me for the first time today, I'm a curator of magical phrases. I love them. So one of my favorite magical phrases is a part of me. And as a parent or a coworker, this is a brilliant thing to say so that you're not speaking in absolutes. So you could say, a part of me is frustrated, or a part of me is disappointed, or a part of me is angry. When you're talking to your child and they're expressing these feelings of frustration, you could say, hey, you know what? A part of me is frustrated too. I have so enjoyed all of our time together, and a part of me has to be really responsible and go to work. And so there's a part of me that would love to stay here and play more because I loved it and it's been so fun. And there's a part of me that knows that as the responsible adult, as your mom, I have to go to work. And so letting them know that you can feel all of these things simultaneously is such a great way to model it for your kids.
Thank you. We may come back to the kids in a little bit. I want to shift. We had a question come up. Alicia, do you want to ask your question, or would you rather I just read it? Feel free. I'd love to hear your voice and hear it in your words if you'd like.
Sure, I don't mind asking it. So the question is regarding communicating with our staff, especially like in our organization, we did go through some layoffs and some difficult periods. And we're still, we're stable right now, but we're still very uncertain about the future. But we're always really mindful of culture and striking the right tone with our people. So my question was, how do we find the right balance between valuing transparency and wanting to be very transparent with all of the staff, rank and file, all, throughout the organization, with not wanting to contribute to people's fears or insecurities, and just finding, it seems like we're walking a very fine line and doing this very delicate dance, and we're being super thoughtful in how we communicate. I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions on how to balance valuing those two things.
Well, it sounds like and I'm not blowing smoke, it sounds like you're actually already doing a very thoughtful, strategic approach to making sure that you're credible, that you're showing up with clarity, that you're showing up with calm. And here's what I've been coaching, is that you can't guarantee anything right now. You just can't. And that's part of the uncertainty. Everybody wants a guarantee. Can you guarantee that my job will be here? Can you guarantee this salary? Can you guarantee this? But so here's what you say. I may not be able to guarantee much, but here's what I can do. And that's the magical phrase. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can do. I can give you all the data that we have. I can give you up to the date strategy and protocol. I can give you our up-to-date response and how we're going to adhere to some of this new protocol. But here's what you're saying. I can give you transparency. I can give you up-to-date information on the plan as it rolls out. What you don't want to do, is it Alicia? Because I can only see Calderon. Is Alicia?
Yeah, Alicia.
So Alicia, one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to show up either over-promising, over-exaggerating, or under-promising or under-exaggerating. So it is that fine line. I think you use the word precarious, which is perfect. It is precarious, and that's the word that you share. That's the transparency you have, is you can say, well, you know, we're experiencing this time to be precarious as well, and we cannot guarantee anything, but here's what I promise that we can do. I promise that we will show up with up to date. And then you do the same spiel that I just gave.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. As brilliant, and you're not alone. That's got to resonate for everybody.
You've talked to AmyK a lot about high energy versus lower energy words. I mean, I grew up in a home where my mom was always, you know, grading my letters home from college and sending them back in red pencil, and it pissed me off at the time. But now looking back, you know, 30 years later, I'm grateful, because it's like, it taught me how to communicate better. I'm not a master communicator like our guest today, certainly, but I'm proud of the fact that I know how to communicate and write. But there are definite words that we should avoid at all times, but certainly in times like this, and other words that we should lean towards. Any thoughts on those? Well,
this will probably be as woo-woo as I get, but I very much believe in the mind-body connection. And when we have thoughts and stories in our head, there's a physical response in our body. And so whether you're nervous to go public speaking, you'll feel butterflies in your stomach. If you're dreading a conversation, sometimes your chest can get really tight or your throat can constrict. So what we're experiencing as a story in our head absolutely impacts what's going on in the body, and vice versa. And so one of the things that I believe in is that the words that we choose either contribute to our physical, emotional, and mental health, or they detract from it. And so I'll often put people on a diet, and before everybody gets all upset with me, it's a conversation diet, and it's a word diet, and it's really thinking about nourishing yourself. So if you think about the fact that everything in the world that's living requires fuel, food to be energized to grow. And if you think about the conversations that you participate in as food and fuel, ask yourself what you're feeding yourself, like what you're listening to, what you're watching, and even the stories in your head. What am I feeding myself? And is it nourishing me, or is it junk food? Is it like deleting my energy? And so great examples are, I'm overwhelmed, I don't understand, I'm so confused, this is hard. Now those don't sound bad on the surface. They're not bad words, but they absolutely are energy draining words. So if I want to spiral around with, oh, I don't understand this, and this is so hard, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's not, and I'm really going to be clear on this because I don't want to be misunderstood. It's not about false optimism. It's not about sis boom ba. It's not about kumbaya. It's a very subtle shift to, I got this. Deep breath. One step at a time. So I'll give you a real world example. So we've been doing virtual webinars, virtual keynotes for years, but clearly it's taken off, right? So, you know, virtual webinars, all the Zoom calls, all of it's more so than ever. So we've had a studio in our house for years where I make videos, but we needed new equipment. We just needed to kind of up our game. So we ordered all this stuff, and all this stuff kept arriving. And it was like, oh my gosh, here's a new camera, and here's a new light, and here's a new this, and here's a new that. Well, one morning, I just looked at this whole stuff. Everything's like pulled out of boxes, and I was just like, I'm overwhelmed. And then I was like, woo, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. So my new phrase was hashtag, I can get good at this. Hashtag, I can get good at this. So every time I picked up a piece of equipment and I started to go, oh, I was like, okay, deep breath, turn that gasp into a, I can get good at this. And it so helps the way that you play. It helps the way you show up.
Oh, I'd get Zoom requests from people 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago for a meeting. And I'd say, oh, really? Can we just get on the phone? Now I get requests for phone calls. Oh, really? Can we just get on Zoom?
Exactly.
I mean, I totally 100% shifted. And what's worked for me in that case, I've had 2 prospect calls in the last week and a half with family businesses I had not met before that I met through some of you on this call right now. And it's been so refreshing that other than an email to set up the meeting, my first communication with them has been face to face. You know, there's a Mexican restaurant, a company that makes chips and tostadas down in Monterrey, Mexico, and they have a small location here in Southern California. And it would have just been a phone call, maybe a couple of text messages, something along those lines. But now I almost feel like I have a friend. You know, we've had 2 Zoom calls, and, you know, we're trying to arrange when I can get to Monterrey, Mexico to visit their facility, and when we can all get a group of us together to have them come and visit our facility and visit theirs. And it's just, it's really that shift, and I love it. So I like that hashtag, I can get good at this. Anything that we stink at or stunk at that we're good at now, we can look back at that and say, wow, we've figured this out. So using a computer or whatever the case may be. In your work with CEOs, you do a lot of work around the world with CEOs from countries everywhere. And you and I have talked in detail about this in the past. Is there 1 or 2 messages that they're starving for, or that you're finding that you're sharing with them? We have a lot of CEOs on this call today.
Yeah, and this might even go back to Alicia's question, and that is that almost everybody that I'm talking with right now, we're talking about something called the Stockdale paradox. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many people on this call will remember, but Stockdale was a vice presidential candidate that ran with Ross Perot. And before he ran with Ross Perot, he had his own incredible career. And sadly, a part of his career of service was that he was a POW, he's a prisoner of war. And when they interviewed him, when they came home, they said to him, you know, what do you think is the difference between what allowed you to survive and other prisoners of war to not survive? And he said, it was the credible hope that we had. And this credible hope is what has become known as the Stockdale paradox. And that is that if you're sitting here saying, oh, we'll be home by Christmas, we'll be home by Christmas, we'll be home by Christmas, and Christmas comes and goes, it erodes your resiliency. But if you can say, we'll be home, I don't know when, but we will get home, you have greater grit, perseverance, and determination to stay alive and survive, because you haven't put some arbitrary boundary that must be met and then have a false expectation or be majorly disappointed when it doesn't happen, and then your hope gets eroded more. And so what he was saying, the Stockdale paradox, is that you stay optimistic, but it's a realism that allows you to say, okay, I've got to actually buckle down and survive. I do believe that we will get home, but I have no idea when, so I have to figure out how to face this moment. And that goes back a little bit to what I was saying with Alicia, is that it's showing up with credible clarity and calm. So if you say, oh, everything's going to be back to normal by next year, and it's not, then everybody's just like, when does this marathon end? Whereas if you're like, no, we're going to adjust and adapt as we go, and we're going to figure out how to be resilient and thoughtfully responsive and find the best and choose our thoughts as we go and take actions in the moment. That's the beauty of survival.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we actually shared that on a video here a few weeks ago on this call. Some may have seen it. And it's that the optimist is great. We always want to be optimistic, but if you're overly optimistic, and I tend to err on the side of optimism. I was raised in a home like that. You know, every meal is the best meal and every experience is the best experience. Well, they can't all be the best. Something had to be less than the other. It's the realistic approach that really seems to be. You're leaning in like you might have a question.
Oh no, we were raised in different homes. Mine wasn't negative, but it wasn't. It was. I don't know if everything was about being realistic and not. Yeah, so I didn't live with that optimism that he had. So I was just adjusting my seat. I wasn't.
So I didn't do a good job of reading the number.
But I'm told all of this is really resonating with me, though.
But Lorianne, that's a great point. And that goes back to, again, from a standpoint of leadership, everybody's having different experiences. And so we have to take that into account, that people have different pasts, they have different presents, and they're going to have different future. And so you've got coworkers right now, or direct reports, that may or may not have children at home. Some are isolated. And so like we were on a webinar the other day, and I said, show of hands, how many of you are actually, you're not craving alone time, you're craving connectivity, because it is not that you have so many family members under one roof, it's that it's me, myself, and I. in almost all your conversations, and tons of hands went up. So I think, again, it's really leaning into ask what people are experiencing. So, okay, here's a great story. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, we were doing a Tiger Team call. And a Tiger Team is just when I've got 3 or 4 clients and we're working on somebody's issue. And so this one guy shows up on the call and he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't ask for it, but this was like my best week ever. I've made more money in the last week than like I've made all year. Well, you could have heard a pin drop. And then it's like, hey, everybody, how you doing? And this one guy was like, how am I doing? Now you're going to ask how I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'll tell you how I'm doing. I just laid off like my entire team. So you could just hear this major tension. And that again, just makes us aware everybody's having a different experience and filtering it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about, we're going through this together, different boats and so forth. I've talked with a lot of family businesses, even as recently as this week, who maybe the worst is still out ahead of us. There are family businesses that, we were humming along, and businesses in general, we were doing great. So the recession 10 years ago, we gradually started going down, and we stayed down longer, and it took longer to come back up. We've had an economist on last week. We had an economist on the other day with our Lemonade Summit that we did, where they're talking about, we were going on great, and all of a sudden we just dropped into the Grand Canyon, and we don't know how long we're going to be down here. Give some advice or some wisdom or some thoughts on how to communicate to these folks who maybe the worst hasn't even hit yet. And I'm not going to end on this. We're not going to end on a downer by any stretch, but there are some out there that maybe haven't been through the slicing in their company like a lot of others have already had to go through. What would you suggest? And that's open to all of you, by the way. Many of you have already been there that can hear my voice right now. If you want to chime in too with what you've done, but AmyK, thoughts for those that may have the worst still ahead of them?
Well, I think that's the reality. And I think that it goes back to kind of the culmination of everything that we've said is that, you're better off being transparent. You're better off saying that I understand this is hard. And I think you're better off saying, right now, here's what we're doing with the data that we have. Here's how we're responding. In this moment, this is where we're at. I think you can also do projections. So for instance, if you think that something might improve, you can give that projection. If you think something might be worse, you can give a projection. But I would do it based on calculated data, and I would say that the data can always shift. So for instance, one of the things that we're finding is very frustrating is that the data that we've been given may or may not be accurate right now from the CDC. And so just sharing that and being transparent and saying, right now, what we're predicting is a phase 2 or a phase 3 by September or October. We're making decisions based on this data. And here's what's really important for people. They want to know the thought process behind the decision. They want to know that you didn't just, make it in some willy-nilly fashion.
Why?
And so if you can say to them, okay, here's the data that we've gotten. Here's the thought process that we've had for making this decision. Now we're projecting this. And so we're thinking that what we're going to do is X, Y, or Z. And here's why. Here's what we're trying to mitigate. Here's what we're trying to put guardrails around. And here's what we're going to try to create where we're going to try to create some momentum and some stability. Now, as the data, and this is really important, not to say the word change. As the data shifts, our response will shift in as a direct reflection of that, or in parallel to that, or we will shift our response as well. But really finding a word that allows people to realize you're not just going to do a 180 on them. And you might, and this is the crazy thing, you might have to do a 180. But when you use language, people respond very defensively to, well, then we'll just change it. Then we'll just come up with a new thing. You're like, no, we will shift and adapt as the data shifts and adapts. That just allows people to feel like you're calm, you've got a plan, you're thinking it through.
I physiologically felt something in me when you used the word shift there as opposed to change. And I know you were giving a hypothetical, but I felt it. And I know that other people do as well. I also want to point out something for the audience today that I'm noticing in AmyK, that I've noticed in the past with you and with great communicators, is when you're asked a question and the answer is, talk about the difference in positive or negative words or whatever, you'll jump right in and give you responses. But when I ask you a question about communicating difficult things, I've noticed with you, and you did it again, you pause and then you start in soft.
Mm-hmm.
Such a powerful technique. Not even a technique, it's just your style. And I'm going to try to adapt more of that myself, that somebody asks me something difficult and I know what I'm about to say might be difficult for them to hear, pause for a minute or a few seconds and then come in soft, because to me that's so much more powerful than just my normal style of just jumping in and getting enthusiastic and talking about it. So yeah, and trying to solve all the problems that I probably had nothing to do with, or maybe I did everything to do with.
Well, thank you. I think communication is a practice, like everything else. We practice it every day. And when we practice the right stuff, then our muscle gets strong and we can use it. I think that no matter what you're talking about, when it's important, think about the very first words that you say, mm-hmm. because they're going to create an entire framework for the conversation. And so when you're responding to a spouse, when you're responding to a kid, when you're responding to a direct report or a board member, the very first words out of your mouth are going to resonate neurologically more than anything. And what they're going to do is they're going to tell that person's brain, is the data coming at me safe, or is the data coming at me going to make me go to my stem reptilian part of the brain and be really reactive and defensive? And so when you say something to me like, and I'm just going to be irreverent here for a second, and it's this completely irreverent example, but it's a great one that shows it. If you come to me and say, hey, have you stopped hitting Scott? Because Scott's my significant other. Like, have you stopped hitting Scott? If I say yes, I just admitted I've been hitting him. If I say no, then I'm still a jerk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But if I say to you, I love Scott so much, then you relax, because you're now like, oh, this information is safe. But if I just come in like, why are you asking me about Scott? Then your brain goes on heightened alert and you don't even process fully in your neocortex, where your higher level intelligences are. So the first thing that we want to do as leaders is we want to give a piece of data through our words, through our body language, that tells all the other brains that are listening, this data can go to your higher level intelligences, not your lower brain, your stem reptilian. And you'll get a completely different physical and verbal response from somebody when they know where the data should go in their brain.
Another question from Alicia. And Alicia, I'm going to phrase it, but you can jump in as well, because I've seen this a lot with a lot of these families. Some of the companies we work with are very large and have massive leadership teams. Others, it's one leader or one or two leaders and the rest are the employees. What do you do when you have, well, her question, the way she typed it, and I'll read it the way she did and maybe edit a tiny bit. Do you have any suggestions on managing our leadership's role, so the leadership team morale, when there's so much uncertainty? Not everybody's on the same page.
Yes. So I go back to one of my all-time favorite tools, which we share. It's called Aligning Brilliance. And the Aligning Brilliance tool is really a 6-question format. And so you start with, what are our strengths? And the what are our strengths is, what are we doing right now as an adjective that's good? In other words, individually and as a leadership team, what are our strengths right now as they exist today? Then you move to question number 2, what's working? And this is about creating a foundation of not so much positivity as that we're not caught in a quagmire of failure. So what's working? It could be our payroll system's working, our technology's working, our marketing, like whatever it is, what's working? Also, what's working about the team? So do we have good communications? Do we have consistent Zooms? Are we open? Are we transparent? So number 1 is, what are our strengths individually and collectively as a leadership team? Number 2 is, what's working, both as an organization and as a leadership team? And then you're going to ask question number 3, what are our objectives? What are our objectives just in the next 30, 60, 90 days? That's it. That's as far out as I want you to go, especially in turbulent times. You might even want to just say, what are our objectives in the next 30, 60 days? Like, that might be far enough to go out. And then you ask everybody, what's the benefit to our organization and what's the benefit to our leadership team when we meet and exceed these 30 and 60-day goals? Now notice I didn't say if. This is really important. This is the neuro response to our words. When, not if, when we meet and exceed our goals, what's the benefit to our organization? What's the benefit to our team? And then you're going to go one step further. What's the benefit to our employees? And then if it's appropriate, then you say, what are the benefits to our charities, our causes, or our community? So now we're widening our sphere of influence, and we're feeling far more purposeful now. So this isn't just about us. This is about the people that we lead. This is about the mission of the organization. This is about the impact around us, community and causes. Only then do you ask, what are your concerns? What are your concerns that are within your control and outside of your control? So outside of control, government regulations for when we can open, state, mayoral, city differences, vaccine, when it'll be ready, when our kids can go back to college or not, when the kids at school will open in July or September. Those things are external. But within my control, my approach, my time, my attitude, the budget for whatever, like, again, let them come up with internal and external things. And then here's what you ask. So what do we want to tweak? This is question number 6. So what are we going to tweak? What might we do? And here's the sub question. What might we do more of? What might we do better? What might we do in addition to what we're doing now to ensure that we set ourselves up for success in the next 30, 60 days? And Alicia, it won't matter if they give you a tweak that's massive or if they give you a tweak that's really small. It's just you use the word tweak, because again, I'm not going to say, what do we need to change?
Right.
What do we need to tweak?
Yeah, indicates something minor. I like that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just level the playing field first. Get everybody kind of, it's kind of goes back to the whole negotiation. Let's talk about what we agree on first, so that we don't have to keep going there, but then really focus on the areas where we might have a difference. Alicia, did that answer your question? Katie Rucker had put a question mark and then typed in, you basically answered her question. Katie, do you want to chime in with anything additional? You can, if you, hey, there you are.
You're getting me in my sports mode, and I promised my kids, since I'm here on this family business, when you guys will understand, if I am not home by 2:30, I think that my kids will kill me. So
that's okay.
I'm multitasking while listening to you, so I apologize. But
we relate. Go for it.
Your answer actually just that you had right there really did help. I was really going to say we have been blessed and lucky, knock on wood, so far to not have any sort of financial impact to our business. And we have a lot of legacy team members who love to be in their little comfort zone, but we are embracing, we being my sister and I who run our company, are embracing the concept of don't let a good crisis go to waste, and are looking to, really push to make some of these kind of bigger changes that we've been wanting to make organizationally during this time, because it's just kind of the time for that change. But so what I was gonna say was, how do I, while people, nobody's lost their jobs, nobody's had their impact. I mean, they basically do their same job every single day. So how do I get them to realize this is an exciting time for change when they're happy in their little bubble and realizing that the rest of the world of what they can't control is kind of spiraling. So this is their one spot of comfort. But I think what I took away from what your last answer was, is that I love the idea of kind of these tweaks. How do we, talking about these positives and not in a way giving them a chance until the very end to say like what they can't control. So sorry, I just talked in a circle there, but
no, and I think where I would go one step further is that your job right now then is to harness their collective intelligence, and I would pull them together with a Zoom meeting or whatever platform you're using at work, and I would schedule a meeting as early as maybe next Thursday, give them some time to think about it, but I would send out how might we best capitalize on some shifts and some trends or opportunities? How might we best capitalize on this? And let them think about it. And then you can, now Katie, I don't know your business, but you could give them a couple ways or areas of responsibility to think about it. Like, how might we capitalize on, new customer acquisition, or how might we capitalize on upselling, or how might we capitalize on marketing and branding and positioning? I don't know. I'm being very generic. You can get really specific. But here's what I love. It's inclusive. Mm-hmm. It's far more engaging. When you say, how might we, it means that there isn't one right answer. Oh, and by the way, we're going to co-create it together. Right. And that's the beauty of the Aligning Brilliance tool as well, is that you're getting everybody engaged. You're getting everybody's buy-in to, from strengths to what could we tweak. You could even do that as a subset to your how might we capitalize on shifts and trends right now.
Right.
And I think that, and I'm going to be a little bit coachy. So I want you to take this with a grain of salt.
Totally.
When we say, let's not let a good pandemic go to waste,
Right.
be careful about who you say that with.
Yeah.
I totally get it, but I just want you to be very careful again about, it sounds hilarious as long as you're not being deeply impacted by the pandemic.
Totally understood. Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's just, and I think that one of the things too, and I'll do the flip of this, you are never in a position where you need to apologize that your business is financially fine too.
Right.
There are plenty of businesses, Zoom's one of them, as an example, where they're growing, they're scaling. There are restaurants in New York City that have made more money on takeout than they ever made just with doors open. And so my first thing is that you don't have to apologize.
Right.
That it is hitting you in a different way. It's just being aware that everybody's having a different experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, even when you're saying that, it's interesting because like we haven't been able to get our team to realize that we could come out even like stronger, which and Ed knows, I mean, we're in the consumer research side of things. There's so much potential for our business right now because all consumer behavior is changing and like how to help brands be able to do this. We are at a spot that we can just like take off, and the team seems so comfortable to be exactly in the little happy domain that they've been in for so long that they're not seeing that bigger term vision, which that just comes to us to have to sell the vision. Maybe
to sell the vision to them, and then also to put your sales team in a position where there's a huge difference, Katie, between making money from a crisis
right
and making money during a crisis.
Right.
And you all can make money during a crisis, and I think that again, it's also going to change the language of how they go out to the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And again, coming from a place of service to say consumer behavior is changing. Let us help you understand it. Yeah. Let us help you pivot in your own marketing messages rather than, oh my God, and I know you know all that. I'm just saying that this is a great example for everybody on this call. We can resonate with the fact that we're going to have to shift our positioning to respond to different needs.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, go have fun with your kids.
Thanks. Oh no, I still gotta send off my invoices for the day.
Okay.
So AmyK, another guy on our call, Tam Nguyen, who I'm not going to call on to talk, but Tam and I took a group of students over to Vietnam in November around Thanksgiving on a study abroad for Cal State. And one of those students who we got really close to was on the call, Sherry, and she just typed the question mark. So if Sherry's a student at Cal State Fullerton and has obviously been experiencing what we've talked about earlier a little bit, I have no idea, Sherry, what your question is. So the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for your introduction. And hi, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. I really appreciate it. I have actually a small journal where I'm going to definitely be filling out a lot of pages with your words. So thank you so much. Regarding something that you're talking about, communication and communicating feelings and validating those feelings, how do you help someone that isn't as outspoken about their feelings, who's not a child? It could be a coworker or it could be an interpersonal relationship. And how do you show that you are listening and that you want to hear what they have to say, but they're just their personality is not very outspoken?
So one of the things that I would do, Sherry, is I would ask them, or you can say, this might even be easier for somebody who's not outspoken, is I could say, hey, Sherry, you sound inquisitive. You sound curious right now. Tell me the thought behind that. And I'm happy to be wrong. So first of all, am I getting it right? Is that what you're feeling? And so like, if we role played for just a second, Sherry, and I said, hey, you sound inquisitive about communication. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell me the thought behind that? Can you tell me a little bit more about why you care about this?
I think I'm like very empathetic as a person. And so I really want to care about the people in my life, and going into the business world in the future, whether like my relationship with my coworkers or if I have my own team members or employees, I want to be able to cater to their needs. But if I can't get them to tell me how they're feeling in a positive way, I think it's a lot harder to build that relationship. So
yeah, you're spot on. Emotional intelligence is so important. In fact, there's more than one study that says EQ is more important than IQ. So one, I love to hear the fact that you want to be empathic. That's going to make you a fantastic leader. It's an absolutely necessary foundation. So do you see what I just modeled? I'm saying, I'm happy to be wrong. So for instance, Sherry, let's do it. Let's do the reverse and be wrong so we can set you up to be confident. Sherry, you sound really angry. Are you angry?
No, I'm not.
Oh no. Okay, well then what are you feeling?
Sherry doesn't get angry from my experience with her.
Right. So this is easy to role play because she's not angry at all, right? So, but here's what's great. It's okay to be wrong. So if I say to you, hey Sherry, it sounds like you're angry. Is that am I hearing you right? Come back and tell me what it is that you really are.
No, I'm
Or say no.
and that's really cool. Oh, I love this. Thank you for the role.
Yeah, so here's what happens. It's okay to be wrong. So for instance, if I said to, I'm just gonna pick somebody that's on the screen. Sally, you're on my screen. You wanna unmute yourself for a second? We're gonna play.
Okay, she's there.
Nope, she's not.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Sally, we're gonna play for a second. You ready?
Yeah.
Sally, you sound really frustrated. Are you frustrated?
Not at all.
Oh, well then tell me what's going on.
I am frustrated with the family business. And I've been trying to figure out this Zoom thing so that I could ask that question.
Yeah. And you know what? The Zoom technology is new for a lot of people. Is it new for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At this age, I'm constantly trying to figure out all these new things.
And you did it because you're talking to me.
At least I'm trying.
No, it's good. Hashtag Sally, we can get good at this.
Get good at this. Exactly. Perfect.
Now, Sherry, did you see that it's okay to be wrong? And yet what was fascinating is that when I gave her that frustration thing, notice what Sally did, which is also very, very normal. It did trigger where she is frustrated in her life. So then she shared, yeah, I am about this family business. So what I'm doing is I'm actually getting her to open up more and to really talk about what's going on. Sometimes it'll trigger something, sometimes it won't. But here's the cool thing about communication. You don't have to be right as long as you come with the, I'm curious. If you come with, well, you must be and you sound, I didn't do that. I came with curiosity, like, hey, you sound, am I interpreting that correctly? Am I getting it right? And then people feel like, oh my God, this person really wants to understand me. And bottom line, like Ed, if they take nothing away from today's call, that one of the most fundamental needs by every single person on the planet is to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood.
Absolutely. Yeah, I talk about that a lot with my students too. You know, people love to tell their story. They love to hear their first name, but more importantly, they want to be understood. Yeah. That's why one of Covey's 7 habits is seek first to understand, then to be understood. We focus so much about understanding other people more than getting our point across. People are going to be more inclined to listen to you once they really feel like you get them. So we're at 2 o'clock, which I've committed we would end. Want to open it up. If anybody has any questions, speak now. We have From the Heart, our podcast. We have a YouTube channel, and what my plan is to upload this afternoon to the YouTube channel. You can either just go to YouTube and search for From the Heart, or you can email me and I'll get that to you. I see Dr. Blanchard, you're back on with us. I always love when you join us. Anything you'd like to share from what you've heard, or just your experiences, or what's going on in your life that, for those that don't know Dr. Ken Blanchard, I'm sure you all do, because he's been on with us and he's one of my mentors. How you doing, Ken?
Well, good. Amy, you're terrific. I think the big point I got, and so important, is that you want to be where other people are, not where you are, and bring them out first. It's about them, not you. And when they find out that you're really interested in them, then the dialogue can really happen. But if you're walking around pontificating, it's not going to do anything. I think the biggest thing I like to ask people is, what have you learned during this time? You know, and that always stops them a little bit. But I've been learning technology. I celebrated the 60th anniversary of my 21st birthday, and so I wasn't really big into technology, but it's been interesting to learn how to Zoom and do this. And I've been in contact with people I haven't been to in years, and even got to see them.
You've been leaving some great messages too on LinkedIn and other platforms too, Ken. I've always followed what you do, but it's been fun to be able to see what technology has done for you and be able to get your message out to people too.
But thank you, Amy, for your whole philosophy of bringing out the best in other people. And
Well, Dr. Blanchard, I learned a lot of it from you, sir. So you've been an absolute icon and mentor for me, whether you've known it or not. I just think the world of you. So it's just an honor to be here having a conversation with you.
Well, you both live just a few miles from each other, so I'm going to come down and buy the two of you lunch one of these days as soon as we
Where do you live in San Diego?
I'm in an area called Del Mar.
Yeah, we're in Rancho Bernardo.
Yeah, no, we're not far from each other at all.
Yeah, we ought to get together for lunch sometime. That would be great.
There you go.
And give me her email address.
I will, absolutely. And I know Ken knows a great little pie shop he took us to when we were down there last year.
Debbie's Pie Shop.
Oh, we're going. We're going.
We had lunch, but that was just what we did to get to the pie.
Yeah.
So,
When I had my birthday, Debbie sent over a blueberry pie.
oh,
She
there
made
you
it for me
go.
with hearts on it. The owner, she's terrific.
That's awesome. Well, if no one else has any other questions, and AmyK, you've been fantastic, and Ken, it's always great to see you. Just a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you so much, AmyK. Every Monday, and Lorianne and I wake up and we talk about, okay, what are we going to do on this Friday's call? With that, I want to let everybody know, and we'll put this out in an email too. Next Friday, Katie Rucker, who was on earlier and asked a question, she's the one that had to be off at 2:30 with her kids, so I don't know if Katie's still with us, but she has suggested previous topics that we've done, and she made a great suggestion as well for us to hit next week, so I'm just going to preview it now. We want to talk with people who find out what everybody's doing in the community. There's a lot that, some people are actually literally going out in the community, Tam and Charles Antis and others who have been on here today, who are physically out in the community delivering PPEs and food and doing things like that, and there's a lot of that going on. We'd like to, Dr. Blanchard always talks about catching people doing things right as part of his 1 Minute Manager and other books and so forth. So on those themes, we want next week's call to be all about what are you doing? What are you who are listening now or watching, and those, we're going to again reach out to others later. What are you doing in your communities? How are you blessing other people's lives? How are you virtually and literally volunteering in your communities? How can we help? What can we do to reach out to help in your efforts? I will speak on behalf of Katie and Jenny from McKenzie Corporation, because I believe if Katie, you're still there. Do you want to share with us the little offer that you've made? And
Sure. Thank you for sharing about it too. So yeah, I had shot Ed a note and said, let's just do a Feel Good Friday. I think we've had there's a lot that we're managing, and even sitting and listening to this conversation about how each of us as leaders are navigating the different conversations we have to have. And there's just so much that we're having to navigate. And I said, I wouldn't mind spending an hour just focusing on the good that's happening out there in the world. So again, being able to showcase some of that from our team members or a part of our community here. And Jenny and I then, we're making a pledge that for each nonprofit that gets highlighted on the call next week, we'll pledge $1,000 to each one of those, up to $10,000. So we're really excited to be able to hear about the amazing work that our family business communities doing, and Mackenzie's just super honored to be able to help throw some support to those great causes.
And I got to tell you, it's hard for me to follow Katie's comments without crying a little bit, because I've been very close to Katie and her twin sister Jenny for about a decade now since I've been in this role. And I know that when the pandemic hit in March, I'm going to offend somebody here in a second, they were scared shitless, like a lot of us were, about, are we going to
crushingly overwhelmed is what I say usually.
There you go. And to be where you are now, where you're making that generous offer it's mind-blowing to me, but not at all. It doesn't surprise me because of the types of people you are. And so we're going to issue that challenge out to a lot of people. If you want to highlight any cause you're involved with, any specific foundation that you're involved with, you make a donation, so will they, and we'll find a way from the Center for Family Business and the Hart Leadership Group to get involved in that too. So I can't commit a dollar figure because we haven't talked about it, but
that's okay.
we'll definitely get involved.
I emailed you without talking to my partner and crying.
Yeah, you committed it before you talked to Jenny, but thankfully Jenny was on board. So anyway, we'll talk more about that. We'll send a blast out on Monday or Tuesday to everybody. In the meantime, AmyK, I'm going to give you the final word, and then I'm going to thank everybody before she does that for being with us today, and wish you all a happy Memorial Day weekend. But AmyK, take us home.
I'll just say one final thing, and that's what I always believe, and that is that our life, both at home and at work, is happening one conversation at a time, and the quality of our lives is a direct reflection of the quality of those conversations. So go out there and just take it one conversation at a time.
And wait, I do have one last word, but it's for you. How do we reach you and tell us about your book, your latest book?
Oh, you can reach me at amyk.com. Super easy. It's my first name, AmyK, AMYK.com. And there's tons of free resources on our homepage, tons of free resources. So our most popular is that conversation prep planner. So you're welcome to download that. And there's a bunch of other stuff there at amyk.com. And if you really want to like take this conversation and become a master communicator, we've got the book, Get It, which is an Amazon bestseller that's brand new, came out just a few weeks ago, and we've hit off the charts because it's filled with my magical phrases and my favorite stuff. But this was about service today. So if you just want to continue the free goodness and that's where you're at, you can go to our website and you can find out all about us and our programs and keynotes and all that stuff there.
Awesome. And like I said, I'm uploading it to YouTube. It'll be on the From the Heart YouTube channel by the end of the day. You can get it there. And if anybody wants access, if you didn't get that with AmyK, let me know. I'll be happy to put you in touch. Dr. Blanchard, always great to see you. Sally, thanks for chiming in each week. Katie, everybody for being on today. Sherry, it's been a great call, great conversation, and I love next Friday. I feel like today's been Feel Good Friday, but certainly, Katie, you just coined next week's workshop for us, so thank you. Feel Good Friday. One last thing, next Thursday, Roger Koch, 10 a.m. Roger is the former CFO of In-N-Out Burger. He'll be our speaker for our family business workshop, 10 to 11 a.m. next Thursday. Most of you probably received that already. If you didn't and you're interested, he'll be talking about the financial responsibility we as leaders have now, and especially now in times of crises, but going forward as well. And it's a great presentation. That's my 3 o'clock today, is to dress rehearse with him on that. So looking forward to all of you on that. And anything you want to add, my dear?
No, for time's sake, no. But
yeah, time's out, and then I give her a chance to talk.
Like,
that's what I do.
No, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. It really resonates, especially the the physiological responses that we have to words, and I personally have had some experiences with that, and it has just been a real powerful teacher in my life. To just be able to use more positive words and to be aware of those physiological responses. And sometimes the physiological responses for something like fear and excitement are the exact same physiological feeling, and it's just what I label it. And that's just been huge for me. So I was thinking about that when you were talking, but anyway, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks, AmyK. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be in touch with you all again soon. Thanks, AmyK.
Thank you.